Well, hey everybody, welcome. So glad that you're here. Just taking a look and seeing that lots of people are joining us straight away. So wherever you're listening from, so glad that you're here tuned into our webinar that we've called Bricks and Clicks. And by way of an introduction, my name's Duncan Banks. I'm the director of the Further Faster network of churches in the UK and in Ireland. And I hope you guys are all coping okay with this crazy lockdown life that we're all in. I mean, how have you been coping? I've been learning some new skills. My wife's been doing lots of baking, so I've learned to go up a trouser size every 3 days, which has been quite frightening. I've learned how to do a whole brand new bunch of cocktail recipes from whatever I can find in the back of my cupboard. That's been exciting as well. But anyway, this is the Bricks and Clicks webinar, and I'm just noticing that lots of people are continuing to join, so you're welcome. So just to be clear, today we're talking about how to think about your church after lockdown. Is it going to be a brick church or a click church or a bit of both? And so if you're expecting a webinar on wicker bottom chair repairing for the over 60s or underwater bungee jumping or something like that, then now is the time to jump out and leave. So yeah, great to see so many people joining us. Listen, why don't you let us know in the chat that you'll see at the bottom of the screen, a chat function there. Dive into that chat function and just let us know where you're listening from, because I know there are people from right around the place listening. So I'm really glad about that. Just say hi, let us know where you're listening from, and it'd be great to figure that one out. So this is part one of a 2-part webinar series we're doing. We're back here again this time next week for part 2, and you're really not going to want to miss that. But without further ado, let's dive on and let me introduce you to our very special guest from North Point. Morning, Lane. It's Lane Jones there. It's morning for you, isn't it? Hope you're well, my friend.
It is.
Yeah, cool. Why don't you tell us where you are, and why don't you tell us how long you've been around North Point, and tell us what your role is at North Point right now, Lane.
Okay, glad to. Currently, I'm actually in Orlando, Florida, visiting my grandchildren. So it's great to be with all of you. Know a lot of you. I see a lot of names in the chat that I recognize. So great to, I guess, be seen by you. I can't see you right now, but yeah, I've been at North Point Ministries. It'll be 25 years this fall, and which is a just mind-blowing thing to think about. But currently, I am the Sites and Export Director, which means I oversee, or I just sort of help Andy manage our local campuses, as well as our partner network and our resources, and then our media export. So Your Move, the television program, and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So, and to say that I oversee that just means that if there's a question, you know, I try to find the answer, because there are amazing leaders leading all of those initiatives, and you're about to meet one of them right now.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Wow. You don't look like you could have been there for 25 years, Jeff. Did you start when you were 15 or something? That's amazing.
Me? Oh yeah, no, yes.
Great. Thanks. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Lane. Moving to our other guest, we've got Jeff Henderson with us this morning. Morning, Jeff. I hope you're enjoying La Vida lockdown in the USA. Do you know what? Seriously, Jeff, a friend of mine texted me to say, I've noticed you're doing a webinar with Jeff Henderson. Is he the guy that invented the Muppets? But that's not you. That's somebody else, isn't it?
I'd love to take credit for it. If I did, I probably wouldn't be here. As much as I love both of you, I'd probably be retired if I invented the Muppets. But no, that's not me.
That's Jeff Henson, isn't it? That's a different guy altogether.
I think it's
Jim Henson.
Jim Henson. There you go. Okay.
And he's no longer with us, so I'm glad Jeff didn't do that. So
what's your role then, Jeff, in this whole North Point family?
So I'm at Gwinnett Church right now. I've been on staff at North Point for 17 years, started at Buckhead Church, was lead pastor there. And then about 9 years ago, we started this location at Sugar Hill in Gwinnett County. My wife and I are from Gwinnett County, so it's been fun to launch a church in our home county. And my dad actually pastored a church down the road years ago. And then about a year ago, we launched a second Gwinnett Church location, so we oversee that as well. So been here 17 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. And the great thing about Jeff is Jeff's also been involved in the marketplace in the business world as well, so can bring lots of expertise from that part of life as well. So at any point today, if you've got any questions or any comments you want to make, you're already using that chat feature, go ahead and drop questions and comments in there. And Matt is keeping an eye on all that for us, which is great. And also just to say that at the end of our webinar today, I've got a very special offer for some of you that I think you're going to love and not want to miss out on. So hang around for that, and I'll let you know what that is when we come to the end. So by the end of our hour together, I'm hoping you're going to come away with two specific things. First off, you're going to have a brand new framework to hang all your church after lockdown conversations around. And the second thing is, I hope that you're going to start to find a way of rethinking your church, maybe even as a startup church. So they're the two things I want you to come away with. So I'm going to dive right in. I'm going to give the microphone, if you like, to Lane. Lane, tell us, what do you think North Point's going to look like after lockdown, and how are you getting there? What's the process to get you there?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I have no idea specifically what it's going to look like. We're in the process of figuring that out. I don't think it's going to look that different, but I think there are going to be some key differences, and we're actually in the process of exploring those, discussing those, in some cases debating those right now, and the framework that really Andy gave us to process this, and we've processed it at every level of the organization. So every campus and their teams have processed it. All of our multi-campus teams have, and then we've gathered as a leadership team and process this. But it's just to really look through everything. I think the basis of the whole thing is that it would be a shame to have gone through this process and not be better for it. And so we're really trying to say how can we come out of this as a better organization, better doing what we believe God's put us in a position to do. And so we have 3 words, and they all start with RE, and so that it makes them a little bit easier to remember. But to rethink, to retain, and to retire, or to retire, I can't remember the order that we had them in, but rethink what we're doing in light of what we've learned, retire some things we don't need to be doing, and then retain some things that we've added during this season that we think are game changers for a particular area. And so those are our 3 words, the 3 buckets that we've tried to go back and put everything in. I would say 3 other questions, because 3 is the perfect number, so we do everything in 3s, that we sort of added on to these as we began to think about it, are what are we willing to give up to move forward? In other words, you've got to give up something to add something, or at least you should. I just say, if you're one of those highly positive leaders who's thinking, oh, no, we're just going to add on, we can keep doing what we were doing and add, you may think that's possible, but I can promise you your team is looking at you like you've lost your mind. So, we have to ask the question, what are we willing to give up, to move forward? And then we just have to ask the question, what is moving forward? Because I think there is a whole new, potentially a whole new definition of success. And as we begin to do some new things, we've got to figure out what a win is. And that's one of our sort of basic question is, what's the win? What's the win in this? So as we add new things, as we rethink ways of doing ministry, really redefining what the win is for those things. So, what is moving forward? And then the final question that we added to is, what for us, and I would say this for any leader, is what is core? What is the thing, or what are the things that you do that if you were to stop doing, you would no longer be distinctly who you are? But also, if the organization decided, hey, that's, we're going to retire that, and, would you say, that's why I'm here. I'm here because of, that, either that mission, that vision, that program, whatever it is. So it's just good, I think, for everybody to ask the question, for me personally, what's core about what we do? Because the last thing you want to do is mess with the core, number one, but also if for some reason the organization moves in a different direction and away from your core, you probably would, want to find something else to do or figure out something because you don't want to, just keep a job. So, so those are our 3 additional questions. What do we have to give up to move forward? What does moving forward really look like? And then ultimately, what's core that we don't want to mess with?
That's great. So you got these 3 buckets about rethinking, retaining, and retiring. That's a great
Right.
framework for leaders to spend time figuring out what are the things that we can think differently about, what are the things that we can chuck out, and what are the things that we cannot afford to chuck out. We have to retain them. We have to keep going them. So those 3 R's or REs are really helpful. And we're going to look at the second 2 next week. The whole retire and retain thing, and we're going to concentrate on the rethink thing this week, and Jeff's going to help us a bit with that. But what I'm interested to hear from you, Lane, as well is what's the process you've gone through? So you've figured out those 3 questions. Have you asked the entire church what they think about that? Is it just department heads? Is it your volunteer teams? How have you gone about the process of gathering the information to figure out what are the things we're supposed to rethink and retain and retire?
Yeah. For us, primarily because we are a rather large organization, we've been able to have those conversations with staff and, have them at that level. But we've had them throughout all the departments of the church. So it's not just, it's not just the leadership level or the top levels of leadership. I think another key piece of the way we've done it is we've also not done it within silos. It's not been, okay, children's ministry, what do you think you need to rethink, retain, and retire? We've asked everyone, hey, now's the time to look across the fence, look into your neighbor's backyard. You're our best, our best raving fans. So you know what works well, what doesn't. So we've given everyone permission to speak into areas that aren't necessarily theirs, and you have to have tough skin. You have to sort of really gear up for that kind of conversation, because people start messing around with your pet projects. But at the end of the day, we think that's how we're going to get to a place of being better. So I would say in our case, we've been able to do it with staff. I would say you need to look at your church, who are the influencers. For many churches, and for us in the early days, it was volunteers, key volunteers. You would want to involve them in those conversations. But we have yet to necessarily go to to our attendees, but we've kept them in mind, because the other thing that we've had to always keep in the back of our mind is the people who attend our churches attend them because they love what we're currently doing. So, our current model is perfectly designed to attract and to get the results we're getting. So, we could rethink, retire and retain our way right into changing a church that, people love to attend, so we don't want to necessarily do that, but also we want to keep the tension or keep the importance of moving forward, reaching the next generation. And so we are going to have to change some things. So it's a tension that we manage where, it's not, we've always tried to say, we're not focused on who we're keeping, we're focused on who we're reaching. But at the same time, you start changing the way you do things, and, it will affect, you're changing that person's church. So
yeah, that's great.
We do take that seriously.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Very wise counsel. So what have you noticed, Lane? So Karen has asked in the Q&A. She's asked, what are the examples of some wins in this period? What are the kind of things where you're thinking, wow, we didn't realize we were forced into lockdown. We didn't realize this was going to be so successful. What are some of the wins that you've noticed?
I think some of the bigger ahas were, I think it always depends on the person. I think there have always been people on our teams that have said we could have more of an impact digitally than we, currently do. And there are people who are just, they're face-to-face, kind of people, and we need to be in a, circle together. And that's, critical. I think we did find that, a lot of that is personality based, and there are people who love to connect digitally, and we can leverage that with a certain group of people. especially on the family ministry side. I think we just kind of always question, gosh, can you really do online digital, content for children and for students? And I won't say we've cracked the code because we're just getting into it, but we've had a really positive response from, children and students and that kind of thing. So,
So can I just push you on that a bit, Lane? Because I was on a call yesterday with lots of pastors from the UK, and you're saying you haven't necessarily cracked the code, but you feel like you're doing quite well with family ministry. Lots of pastors in the UK are saying we just can't seem to engage, especially the kids. So we can engage the teenagers because they live on Instagram and TikTok and everything else already, but we can't engage the kids.
Yeah, and I would say our experience has been consistent with that, in that the students are far more, they're digital natives. They understand, that whole thing. I think what I'm seeing with the children's side of it is there is an enhancement that we can do digitally that connects families and connects children in a way that in going forward will enable us to, sort of stay connected with them when they're not in the building. To this point, if a kid doesn't show up, then we're just totally disconnected. So I think it is more a sense of finding a way to use digital to maintain a connection in those weeks that they're not in the building. And for us, it's, probably, I think our average attendance is slightly less than twice a month, and that's, average. But even the median number is where they're not here half the time. So again, we're just looking at the things we've learned to say, I think we've picked up some things that will enable us to maintain a connection, not replace the live connection, but just maintain more of a connection when they're not in the building, because attendance patterns continue to get less and less on average because of just all the competing things that are out there in culture.
Yeah, that's great. Can I just push across to Jeff on that as well? Because Lane's got this overview of all your churches and a lot of partner churches around the States and around the world as well. But Lane, you're specifically working with, one church with another location. How are you managing the whole family ministry thing at your church in terms of engaging, especially the younger kids? Is that working out for you? What tricks and tips can you share with our guys?
Yeah, I think in this season, it's important to know that content is not king. Connection is. Content is what we do as a church, right? We send content out on Sundays and for adults and family ministry. And we've done that. And to Lane's point, we've shifted. But that's kind of like, if you think about it in the business world, there's customer service and customer engagement. Customer service is the food was hot, you got the food out on time. That's content. Customer engagement is, we see you and we're going to connect with you. So for example, we've had small group leaders who have driven by the homes of our kids just to wave at them. That's a connection point. That has nothing to do with what we're delivering content. That's connection. So how we can get connected, and that's true all over the place. Because when this hit, we had to pivot and shift online. So that's it. That's great. We had to do that. And that sounds easy, and I didn't do hardly any of the work other than some of the online content for adults. But once that was done, that's just customer service. Now we've got to move to customer engagement, and how can we connect with people? And so we've tried to leverage everything from Facebook live events to Instagram live events for volunteer gatherings, for small group Zoom calls. So it's the connection. And what they're missing isn't the content, because they can get content anywhere. What they're missing is the community connection. And so I saw Junior have a question on here about, this may sound good for larger churches, but how do smaller churches do this? I actually think smaller churches have a better, not easier, but maybe an advantage. They can connect quicker to their audience versus maybe a large church, because we got a lot of people to connect with. So I think in this season, we've tried to go connectivity is king, not content. So one of the things we did is we had all of our staff, we're not done yet, but we had all of our staff make a personal touch point to every single donor of our church, primarily by phone calls. We're at 70%. I'm about to have a staff meeting here in about an hour, and we're going to say, all right, we're at 70%. I'm tempted to put the names of our staff that haven't completed their phone calls, but I don't think Jesus would do that. Paul might have done that, but I don't think Jesus would have done that. So anyway, long story short, I really do think connection and connectivity, because that's what our community is missing, is the in-person connection, because that's what this thing is robbed from them. Yeah. So how can you leverage digital to do that? Because I hear a lot of debate between physical and digital. I actually think the secret is local. It's not physical, it's not digital, it's local. How can you create a local church that digital still makes you feel local if you can't have physical right now? So that's for us has been, how can we stay small and connected and be personable in this season? Because technology can allow you to do that. It's not the same as being in person, but if you can leverage digital to be personal, that's the win.
Yeah, I see that. And I wonder as well whether, because certainly what we hear in the UK oftentimes is we're all homeschooling our kids now. And so we get daily emails from the school with curriculum. This is what you need to teach them. This is where they should be up to. These are the tests we want you to do. And so when they also get an email from the KidMin director or the church saying, here's some stuff about Jonah and the whale, it's like, oh man, I can't be done with that. And they push it to one side. And so I've been listening to quite a few kids directors and kids workers talk about the successes they're having, especially with smaller churches, to Junior's point, especially with smaller churches, in actually going analog again. So actually writing, if you've got 15 kids rather than 500 kids in your kids ministry, you could write a postcard to each of them. You could drop something on each of their doorsteps and stand socially distanced and ring the doorbell and say, hi, I've got something for you. So maybe standing out from the crowd by being more analog and less digital might get you some traction, because you can't get through to the kids because the parents are blocking it all because they're too stressed out anyway. So yeah, they're really good. Just either Jeff or Lane, really, just before we move on to some other things, what do you see then? Just again, one of the things that's worrying our churches, and Leon asked this question, it's a great question, is as we begin to drift out of lockdown and back into physical contact again, what do you see for kids ministry going forward? Because we tend to think about adults, we tend to think about what happens in the big room on Sunday, but what do you think about bricks and clicks when it comes to kids ministry when we're allowed to go back into our building again post COVID? How do you see that beginning to pan out and beginning to change?
Right.
I really think that is going to be one of the key areas where the analog, the face-to-face, the light, is still king. I mean, the ability for kids to connect with another adult and to sit in a circle and that kind of thing. So I think that the click side of that is really going to be more of an enhancement to what we do inside the building. Now, I could be totally wrong about that, but I do think that it is still one of the essential reasons that people will show up and will bring for that connection that Jeff talked about. I just think that what we've learned are some ways to enhance that connectivity and to expand it over the entire month, as opposed to the twice a month that the average kid is going to show up. So we're exploring the ideas of like with students, we'll still have the students, in the group, they'll meet, but what would it be like to have students also join digitally into that conversation? And so it's things like that. But I think on the kid side especially, the way we do children's ministry, because we feel very strongly that every child needs to be connected to another adult, and they meet with that adult leader as regularly as possible. So we don't have different leaders every week and children moving from leader to leader. So we believe very much in that face-to-face time. So I think the ability to give parents more resources for the Monday through Saturday periods will be a click side of that. But Sunday, my sense at least, and Jeff, you jump in on this, is that a lot of it will look and feel very similar, just with some enhancements.
How do you see it panning out, Jeff?
Well, we had something interesting happen a couple of weeks ago, and all of our campuses in Atlanta did this. We did, and this may be an American thing, I don't know, but we did a summer drive-through. So we had content for kids that we gave them for the summer, knowing that we're not going to meet in summer. And they would drive through, and we'd be at our church, and we had our staff and our key volunteers there, and we would just hand the stuff through the window, and everybody had masks on and all this kind of stuff. But Duncan, it was so emotional. I think that took us by surprise. Parents were crying, kids were crying. It was just a real emotional experience. Wow. And some people just drove through twice. And in fact, my wife Wendy and I were here. We drove through just because we wanted people to cheer for us. So, as pastors, people don't cheer for you very often. So it was an emotional experience. And when I saw that, and this happened at both locations. Okay, so I just thought, there it is. There's that. The idea that physical gatherings, the thing of the past, I think you can leverage both of these, but the emotional experience, and that happened at all of our campuses. All of our campuses in Atlanta did it. It was emotional. I could send you, probably, if you want to send this there. I sent this to Lane. One of our moms did an Instagram post, and she goes, I'm not somebody that normally cries, but I just miss our church so much. I think that's a really good thing. So, and we're starting to sense some screen fatigue from our families. And so that's why I think we've got to have different expressions of digital content than just an hour on Sunday morning. So we're thinking through all of that.
Oh, wow. That's a great conversation. Thank you. Thanks, both of you. Just before we move on from this, somebody's asked a great question here. Russ has asked the question. It's one thing to connect with the kids, but what about how are you guys connecting with the senior citizens who aren't on Instagram and Facebook and can't figure out how to get on a Zoom call and those kind of things? How are you working with that age demographic to keep them connected?
It's amazing to me. So my mom is 92. And I've been FaceTiming with her. And now my mom holds the camera right up to her face. So I tell her that it's FaceTime, but it's not this FaceTime. So for me, I've been really impressed that, our age group, 65 plus, has been more tech savvy. If you look at Facebook, that's really the demographic is a much older audience on Facebook now. Now we have had a couple of folks in our church pass away, and I would say that's the challenge right now. In fact, I'm doing my first funeral tomorrow night. It's going to be an outdoor gathering. It's for a high school student that passed away with a brain tumor, and we're going to gather outside. Wow. But we've had a couple of senior citizens pass away. We haven't been able to have a gathering, and that's been the hardest thing for us. But for us, part of our model is that everyone would be in a small group. So our small group leaders are able to connect with people. And the thing I love about it is they're able to teach them how to, if they don't want to get on social media, that's one thing, but here's how you can watch online. So I'm pleasantly surprised. We haven't really had anybody say, I don't know how to do this. Now, we do know we have people that haven't been able to watch Facebook Live, Instagram Live, that's one thing. But we haven't had anybody email us and say, or call us and say, I don't know what this thing called the internet is, and I don't know how to get on. So far it's been, I'm sure maybe there's something I don't know, but I'm been pleasantly surprised that at least the content's been able to reach them.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think sometimes we do, it's awful to say, isn't it? But we almost let the older generation off the hook. I've tried to introduce my dad, who's 86, to being able to do FaceTime calls, and we do it. It's interesting because he spends the whole call like this, and you just say, Dad, all I can see is the top of your head, But at least
your dad needs to talk to my mom.
That'd be great, wouldn't it? Again, I'd like to just pop back to Lane for a minute, because lots of people, Jeff, are on the chat saying how much they're coveting your office compared to the pokey little hole they've got in the back of their place.
Church, just so you know, this is not my home.
But Lane, could you, just before we move on to the kind of second part of our webinar today, just remind us of those 3 questions? Because I think this framework, lots of us are looking for a framework to figure out how we transition from where we are now to whatever the new normal might look like. whatever the next
Right.
phase looks like. What are those questions to give pastors a framework to go forward? Remind us, because they're so important.
The three additional questions, or the three that
Yeah, we've got the rethink, retrain,
yeah,
retire. We've got
right.
that, but the three additional
Okay.
questions that really
Yeah, the other
don't
three are, yeah, what are we willing to give up to move forward? In other words, we've got to stop doing something to start doing, something. What does moving forward really mean now in this new iteration? What is a win? And how has that changed? It may not have changed at the macro level. The mission and vision may be consistent, but the further down you get into the organization, the further you get down into the details of how you do small group, how you do children's, how you do all that, it may begin to change. So what does moving forward look like? And then ultimately to have a conversation about what is core. What if you messed with it, would you cease to be the church God has called you to be, where he's called you to be it. So, you don't want to mess with the core. And so I think for many of us, those are the mission vision level conversations. But there may be actually some core programs that you just think, no, that's who we are. That is more DNA than we need to mess with.
Yeah, figuring out your DNA. This season's given
Right.
us a great chance to do that, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
are we just a church that does meetings, or are we more than that? So it's great. I'm hoping we can get. Yes, there's some people I'd love to get onto us. There's so many people asking so many great questions. Again, I want to move on, but this is such a good question. How have you found, both of you? How have you found the importance of small group ministry in this season, and how has that worked out? Have numbers gone up, gone down? Has it worked? Has it not worked? Jeff?
It's worked great. Our Zoom calls have been very well attended, and our small group team is busier now than ever. And the challenge, or actually a good thing, or pre-virus, for our small group team, sometimes it's hard to connect with our small group leaders. Hey, can we get together for coffee? Can we hear how your small group's going? It's not hard. It has not been hard to get in touch with them now. They've got plenty of time on their hands. And so our small group team has been busier than ever. And that's a really good thing. And that's really the foundation of our church is those small groups. We've said for years, circles are better than rows. And to be able, and I've been so encouraged to see small groups posting online. They take a screenshot of their Zoom call and there they are. What's also been fun, I told Lane this a few weeks ago. I drove by the church at night, and it looked like there was a football game in America. They were tailgating. They had their chairs out, and they were doing this, and they were actually meeting and from a social distancing standpoint. So it's been really encouraging to see what's happening in our small groups. Now, I think ultimately they can start getting together now. I think we, in our state, you can get together under 25 people now. So we're starting to see people get back together. But so that's been really encouraging to see.
That's great. Yeah, my small group for the first time is meeting, because we're allowed to meet in back gardens, up to 6 people in a back garden, in a backyard. So we're doing that next week. We've been doing it on Zoom for the past 6 weeks, and it's great. But I can't wait to just see them face to face. We can't hug, we can't shake hands, but we can stand in the garden and eat burgers together. So I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, I think groups more than ever. And I think if we're going to go back primarily to connecting like that, in groups before we meet in a building, now's the time to start investing in reimagining church for our small group leaders, and giving them more energy, and recruiting new small group leaders, and painting a new picture of how important groups are, really. So now's a great time to dive into the whole group thing. Lane, so I keep wanting to move on, and there's so many great questions. One of the questions that's come out, which is so good, is a question of timing and the tension of timing. Is those questions you've asked, is it too late to start asking those questions? Is it too early? How do we know when it's the right time to start planning for the future? Because not everything's certain right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's ever too soon to start asking those questions. I mean, honestly, I think this season has given us the opportunity to ask these questions. I don't think it is the reason I think we should always be asking those questions. And we try to, we're a highly evaluative culture. So I just think this is more like, wow, this is as Jeff said, everybody has a little bit more time, a little less focus. There's, nothing, worth watching on sports and those kind of things. So it's like everybody has some downtime. So that's one of the reasons. But no, I don't think you can start asking these questions too soon, because I think we all know eventually we will go back to whatever normal is. And it may be, in our world, we're thinking it may be this fall. I've heard in the UK and Ireland, sometimes the focus is more, it's like probably pushing toward January. Now, hopefully that's, not the case, but I have heard those timelines. But, as anybody who's over, like 10 knows, January will be here in 2 weeks, and and then it'll be Easter and Christmas again. So I don't think you can start these conversations too soon, and you just have to be flexible. And that's the way we've approached this. Is we have a target, and we're targeting August 9th as our target for opening, based on what we're hearing from our schools. And in our world, at least, that's kind of a benchmark for us. If parents feel comfortable sending their kids back to school, and that is, what the community is doing, then we think they'll be comfortable coming back, to church. So if for some reason things change and the school systems all start saying, "Nah, we're going to push back a little further," we'll probably push back a little further, and we'll sort of, take that lead. But having the conversations now and being ready to implement and make transitions and changes whenever that time comes, I think is just a good thing.
Great. Thanks, Lane. That's really wise. There's quite a few people asking questions. They're very interested to know about what kind of things you're thinking about retiring. I don't want you to answer those, because that's the subject of next week's webinar, and
Right.
we'll pick up those things there. Suffice to say, I was talking to one of the UK church pastors in our network, and they had a variety of different services for a variety of different age groups at a variety of different times, and they're seriously considering, they've been wanting to maybe think about doing that differently for a long time, and this has given them a chance maybe to retire that and do
Absolutely.
those things. So we'll pick some of that up next week. But Jeff, let me move on to you, because the first of Lane's 3 buckets was this rethinking church, and I'm fascinated, Jeff, because I can't remember whether I saw this was something that you'd written or whether I heard you actually say this, but I'm convinced in my mind that I heard you say, "Hey, we're all startups now. Since the COVID thing has hit, and since we've all gone into lockdown, and since we're thinking about church in the future, we're all startups now." What did you mean by that? What does it mean for a church to think of itself as a startup as we think about life after lockdown?
Well, we're all starting over in a large sense. And so anyone that's started anything, and I think most of us have, remember the startup days. You had big dreams and big vision, and you had little resources. So your dreams outpaced your resources. You also had a lot of uncertainty, and you woke up every day wondering, is this going to work? That's pretty much where we are. But there's a big difference between startups and starting over. And startups play to win. Starting over play not to lose. And for any organizations that's been around for a number of years, especially if you've got double digits in years, the temptation is now in a season like this is to play not to lose. You've got to play to win. So we have seen massive changes in our world. I think to keep up, there are going to have to be massive changes in each organization. Now, you can't make change for change's sake, just say, well, we got to have massive change and disrupt it. But I think there's going to have to be some seismic changes organizationally, how you do things, how you think. And so we've got to think like a startup. And the great thing for all of us, this is a great question, is what would we do if we had no money? That's really the land of creativity and innovation. And so this is an opportunity for us, rather than bemoan the fact that maybe resources are down, is to think, a startup would think, we can figure this out. We can bootstrap this and figure and think this thing through. So thinking like a startup and playing to win is a gigantic advantage right now. But if we look at what we've lost and what we like in the past, and it may not equate to the future, it's going to be a hard road for leaders. So thinking like a startup and trying to bootstrap this thing and thinking, what would we do if we had no money? That's the opportunity. It's the challenge, but it's the opportunity before us.
So how does that work? Has that worked out for you at Gwinnett in terms of thinking about where you're going in the future, and thinking about, you know, how, when you sat down with your staff and said, we're starting up, we're starting again, we're starting over, what kind of conversations have you had specifically? Drill us down.
So we outlined what I call the 3 strategies of reentry. So the 3 strategies of reentry would be, okay, between now and whenever we launch, and this is, you know, back in March, we didn't know if we thought we would be maybe, you know, June or July, but now August the 9th. So August the 9th is going to be a reentry. So what are 3 stages that we can go through that will make sure that when August the 9th gets here, we're going to be in the best position possible, financially, spiritually, and relationally as a team, as a church. So I'm a big NASA fan, Apollo space mission fan is in particular, and knowing that there's 3 stages of reentry that NASA will bring a crew or a space capsule down. There's decelerate, there's the heat shield, and there's stick the landing. And so those 3 buckets, I just got with our team and said, all right, step number 1 is decelerate. You know, when this thing started, I mean, we all felt like this, like we're just on a free fall. We got to slow down our fall. So the first thing that we did is we started trying to be as connected to our church as possible so that they felt like we weren't closed. I mean, I tried to say over and over again, Gwinnett Church is not closed. We're just, it's open in a different way. And so that's when our phone calls really started happening. That's when a lot of our live chats started happening. We do these Facebook live chats in between the online gatherings. And what I told our team, a different staff member hosts this every Sunday. I told them, this is not a Bible study. This is not for you to share content. Here's how I want you to think about this Facebook online gathering between the online gatherings. Think of yourself standing in the lobby at church between services and saying hey to people. That's all this is. It's just, oh, hey, Fred. Oh, hey, Mary. Good to see you. How was your vacation? That's all this is. That's a connection point. But what that does is it slows down the fall and people stay connected. Then the second thing with the heat shield, if the heat shield breaks apart, the whole thing falls apart. So from a staff standpoint, we got to stick together and we got to stay together. And it's not just Zoom call staff meetings. We've done game nights. We've done all kinds of crazy things online to try to stay connected to folks. We used to have staff meetings every other week. Now it's every week. We're just trying to stay as connected as possible and to say the vision over and over and over again. And then the final one is stick the landing. And for me, and I've told business leaders this as well, in this season, don't let people get too accustomed to doing life without you. You can't do that. You gotta stay connected. So for us, stick the landing means cash is king. Cash is king, and we got to be great fundraisers without asking for money. So we're trying to save a bunch of money right now, but at the same time, we're trying to make sure that people don't unsubscribe their automated giving. And automated giving is the key. It has been, and it is now more than ever. And so we've been really looking at that number to make sure that it's not falling. And so that's why these personal touch points for our team connecting to people has been so important. So I've just communicated those 3, we got to slow the fall by staying connected. We got to stay connected as a staff. How are we doing relationally? How are we doing as a team? And then we got to stick this landing. When August 9th gets here, we got to be cash positive as best as we possibly can. And all of us are fundraisers. So those 3 strategies have really helped us. I think, who knows? I mean, I mentioned this to Lane last week. Right now, Gwinnett Church is doing really well financially, but who knows what's going to happen? But we can control some things right now. And so we just got to be real. And that's what a startup would do. A startup would count every dollar that comes in. You would put an extra hurdle on expenses. And that's what I told our team. When August the 9th rolls around, let's be careful not to automatically fall into pre-virus spending. Let's have another hurdle I'll give you a quick example. Typically in the fall, we would buy new t-shirts for all of our volunteers. And we were headed down that road, and I said, no, I don't want new t-shirts, because they in essence already had new t-shirts, because we haven't met in like 3 months, right? So it's those kind of things that we were already headed down the road of buying new t-shirts, which is a good thing, but let's not do that this year. Let's just say, hey, keep washing. If you've got a hole in your t-shirt, we'll deal with that. But if the t-shirt still works for volunteers, then we're going to use that t-shirt for quite a while.
Jeff, that is super, super helpful. That really is. And I think if everybody's struggling in the economy because their jobs are uncertain, to see the church splashing out on new this and new that is maybe not that sensitive. Just hanging around the budget question for a bit, because I think that's hot for all of us. One of the things that lots of churches are realizing is if they are going to change and rethink their churches, what they've been doing is up until now putting all their energy in staffing around that hour on a Sunday. And now we're trying to put energy in staffing around being available 7 days a week as a church. So how are you negotiating that? How are you rethinking your staff if you're going to not just be a brick church that does a bit of clicking, but you bring the clicking up and you put a bit more energy into that online world? How are you rethinking budgeting and staffing with that?
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great question. And it kind of ties in real quick. If I can go to Steve's question real quick, Duncan, he says, how do you think like a startup with a staff your size, people's jobs would be at risk? Absolutely. That's why I think really talking to people that are your primary contributors and asking, hey, here's our situation. Will you help me? That's the best fundraising question there is, by the way, is will you help me? Here's our vision. Here's our situation. Will you help us financially? And you got to be quiet at that point and just see what they respond. And you're going to get 3 answers to that. You'll get maybe a yes, you'll get maybe a no, or you'll get I'll pray about it, which is also typically a no. So, but what you have to ask, we got to be a fundraiser. But if fundraising just rests on me, we're not going to be able to get very far. In fact, I got an email last night from one of our staff members who said I was very uncomfortable calling donors. But the conversation, and we're not asking people necessarily for money right now, we're just touching base with them. But the conversations have helped her be a better staff person just because of the conversations that she has had. So I just think that's really important. So what we've tried to do, Duncan, is we've shifted and we've really built up an engagement team right now. And one of the other ways we're trying to stay connected is through a variety of different social media platforms. We'll do something called Mindset Monday. I'm about to record another one later this afternoon. And we've done everything from interview business leaders who are experts on how to work virtually, how to create a virtual workspace. We've interviewed, Andy on, his resource about Money Talks. What are some things we can do personally, financially right now that can help us? So we wanted to create a lot of Instagram and Facebook content so that we're staying connected to people. But to do that, we've had to shift people from our Sunday morning experiences to this engagement team. And I think we'll stay with that. And so I think what we'll discover is that we might have less programming on Sunday in terms of a splashy opening song, and shift some of that energy to more of an engagement online, an engagement team. So there's going to be a sacrifice. I actually think long-term, our services will and should look different. I think early on, I have a hunch that when we open back up, even though it's going to be half the size of the crowd, I think it will be more of an emotional experience. I think people are going to come in limping. I don't think they want a heavy metal opener and then a 45-minute message and a little bit of vision time. I think there's going to be space for prayer, for how are you doing. I think we're going to have to massage the service. Now, will we always be there? I don't know. And I don't want to be anybody that we're not. But I think the programming of the service post-virus, at least in the short term, needs to look and feel different. But that's to your question, Duncan. We've shifted, primarily one of the things we've shifted is more of an engagement through content. Because I would say this, with church online strategy, a lot of churches I think is online strategy is we live stream our services. That's cool. That's a part of it. That should not be the whole thing. There should be these small small interview segments that has really nothing to do with Sunday, but it's just helping people in a variety of different ways. And we'll send an email out on Monday that says, here's our content plan. You can get this on, live, but then you can get it on demand. And one other thing, and I'll be done. The live interaction has been more engaging because people can do this. So I can say, hey, to Willard Baxter. And so when people can actually connect live, that has more engagement than when it's just on demand.
That's so helpful, Jeff. Just to sort of underline what you've just said there, I've discovered in years and years of church leadership how important language is. And you could have easily called that team the digital team, the online team, which would have been a fine title. But what you've deliberately done, in my view, is you've given them the title of what your expectation is of them. The expectation isn't just to do something online. The expectation is whatever we do online, the end result has to be engagement. And so I just don't want us to miss that. Language is important so it sticks in people's minds. We should stop thinking about online teams and digital teams and live streaming teams and think about engagement teams. It's not a social media team, it's an engagement team. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to win online, the only way we're going to win is if we engage a viewer beyond just looking and starting to connect and interact with us. Yeah, so that's super helpful. Lane, did you have anything to throw into the mix?
I mean, I think the question is right on point. Is that to add some things to our plate, we're going to have to reimagine what people's roles are and potentially have to get more out of people than what they were originally hired for. So rethinking all of that, I would say, just as the way we've approached it, and the way I would encourage all leaders to approach it, is to have some sort of financial guardrail for your staffing that sets a limit that says this is healthy, this is where we can go to, whether it's a contracting role or an actual hiring role, and then don't mess with that guardrail. So if someone has to be repurposed to add something and yet stay below that guardrail, that is far more effective and wise long-term than pushing beyond the limits of that you're able to financially, in order to keep from having to disappoint someone or to change their role, or that kind of thing could put you in a position that would put the whole organization at risk. So have those guardrails, have that sense of how where can we operate on the staffing side healthfully and protecting the organization, and then stick with it, and have that in place. Because if you start making hiring and staffing decisions based on opportunity and need, then you can get yourself into some real messes without that guardrail.
So without wanting to let you tell us all the ins and outs of North Point's finances, what percentage of your income is staffing?
Our target is somewhere in the 43 to 44% range. Now that is actual hired staffing, that doesn't include certain things that we contract on a weekly basis or that kind of thing, but it's actually people who depend on us for their mortgages and for their college tuitions and those kind of things. So that's the limit that we set over 20 years ago, and we've it'll creep up, and we'll have to sort of hold down the hiring. And the thing about it is, as your income is growing, there's no problem, because your income is growing, and so you can continue to add. When income starts flattening or decreasing, then you really have to watch it, because those percentages creep up. And I obviously won't tell you everything that's going on, but the numbers started creeping up on us last year, and because we had that guardrail in place, and because we watched that again and again, we made some adjustments toward the end of 2019 to get that back in line. And we were able to close some open positions, so it didn't require us to lay off a bunch of staff, but there were some roles that we had to close, or we had to move people to a different, position than where they were originally hired. And, honestly, having gone through that, when we didn't have to, kept us from having to go through it in these last 3 months when we would have had to, had we, not doing it. So that's why I say having those guardrails in place, having that understanding with your admin team or whoever runs that side of your world, it keeps you from having to make big moves at other times.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Lane. Thank you. Jeff, we're running short on time here, but just quickly, one last question. Adam asks the question, this whole situation, and you thinking about rethinking church. And when if I was at Gwinnett Church and I came back in August after being away for 3 or 4 months, I'm obviously going to find it a different experience because you're rethinking it as a startup. How are you going about it as a leader to share this new vision with your staff and with the entire church and with volunteers? How are you recasting a vision for a different church? What steps are you going through with your staff to do that? Especially with the whole church, not because obviously your staff are walking with you right now, but if I'm in a sense a consumer of what goes on at Gwinnett Church and I find it all different, how are you going to re-envision me about this new direction you're taking?
Well, I think the good thing is the vision hasn't changed. We want to create churches unchurched people love. So that hasn't changed. Our language is we want to be for Gwinnett. So that still is there. Now, how we interpret that and how we do that, that's totally different. So to Adam's question about how we been training the staff. So, I mean, we're still doing what we're doing. So let me tell you what's happening in about an hour. I'm bringing an attender, a friend of mine, to share her story about being a Black woman in corporate America. She's just because we were talking last week and she was telling me her story and I thought, oh my goodness, can you come share that with our staff? Because in this season in America, this is a really important topic for us. So she's about to jump on a Zoom call at 10:30. She's going to share her story and then we're going to do what we're doing here. We're going to have a chat dialogue. So we've been doing that every week, just bringing different people in. I've been bringing business leaders in. I brought a friend of mine from Chick-fil-A to talk about their strategies for reopening their restaurants when that happens. So from a staff standpoint, we're doing what we're doing. In terms of the church culture, what we've been trying to do on Instagram and Facebook Live and these Mindset Mondays and all this stuff, that's one of the things we're trying to shape the culture of our church, in addition to what happens on Sundays. So, but the biggest thing that I think Adam is bringing up that we're probably not doing as well, and I think we'll get better at, is how are we training and recruiting volunteers? Part of that was, this thing is changing so much, even though, as Lane has said, we have August 9th as a target date. There may have been something that happened within the last hour that changes all of that. I mean, I've literally been on a call. I've done one of these Instagram lives with somebody and we've had a conversation about this. I get off the call, I check my phone, and then I'm thinking, I don't know if we can even show that Instagram anymore because something has happened with the CDC. So I would say, to Adam's point though, we have a huge issue right now in terms of recruiting volunteers. How's that even going to work? And then we're going to have to shift, and we have already done this to a certain extent. We are doing some training already online about volunteer training, but that's going to be the big. So I think training staff, we're doing a pretty good job, staying connected with the church as a whole and their spiritual growth and the language and the vision. I think that's pretty good. This whole volunteer piece, that's the big thing we got to figure out, because our concern is if we open up in August and we don't have as many as we need, then it's not going to be the experience that we want everybody to have. Yeah. And that's the other question, I think, as you all think about when you're going to reopen. It's not necessarily when can you reopen, it's when can you reopen in a way that you best serve the people. And the governments may say, this is a date you can do it, but you might go, but I don't think we can do what we do until this day. Yeah. And so that's a different question.
Yeah. That's great. Listen, thank you so much, Lane. Thank you so much, Jeff. Really appreciate your wisdom and
Absolutely.
your time with us. It's fantastic. Just to say, we are back. Jeff won't be back here. Lane will be back next week with Gavin Adams is taking your seat, Jeff. And Gavin is a lead pastor not of Gwinnett Church. That's Jeff's job, but of Woodstock City Church, which is another one of North Point's Atlanta area churches. And we're going to talk about retiring things and retaining things with Gavin and Lane next week. So looking forward to that. I did say that I would offer you something special if you stay to the end of the call. And actually, our audience retention figures have been great. So thank you for sticking with us. Really appreciate that. And it's this. Further Faster would love to come hang out with your elders. They'd love to come out and hang out with your staff team. And so we've got a few spots available. And if you would like us just to spend an hour with your team, having some fun, asking some questions, letting you know the kind of things that we offer, we'd be really glad to do that over these next 2 or 3 weeks. So the way you do that, Matt's going to drop it into the chat right now. The way you do that is you email me, duncan@furtherfaster.network, and just tell me your role in church and tell me your church website address. And we'll pick a bunch of you. Obviously, we probably won't be able to make everybody because there's hundreds of people on this call, but we'll pick a bunch of you and we'll come hang out with you, with your staff, with your elders, and just chat and see where life goes and see what we can learn from each other. So if that helps, if that's a way of serving you, then we will be glad to do that with you. But thanks again, Jeff. Thanks, Lane. Thank you for being part of our conversation. And
Absolutely.
we can't wait to see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
God bless.
Bye.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Lane.
Bye-bye, Duncan.
See you, Lane.